I always thought nostalgia was supposed to be comforting. That's what people say, right? You dig up some old box from the attic, blow the dust off, and for a few minutes you get to remember a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. Maybe you laugh at your haircut, or cringe at the way you used to talk, but it's all harmless. It's supposed to be harmless. That's what I was expecting when I found my old camera. I hadn't seen it in years, maybe a decade, maybe more. It was one of those chunky digital camcorders from the early 2000s, the kind that felt like holding a brick, with a flip-out screen and a battery that barely held a charge. I found it in a box labeled college stuff, wedged between a stack of burned CDs and a tangle of phone chargers for devices I didn't even remember owning. I almost didn't bother with it. I was cleaning out my parents' garage, trying to make space for them to finally park both cars inside. The camera was just another piece of junk, something I'd meant to sell or donate years ago. But when I picked it up, I felt that little jolt of recognition, the way your hands remember the weight of something before your mind does. I pressed the power button, half expecting nothing to happen, but the screen flickered to life, blue and grainy, and for a second I was 20 again. There was a memory card inside. I didn't remember leaving it there, but that wasn't unusual. I'd filmed a lot of nonsense back then, road trips, parties, late-night rants with friends who'd all drifted away. I figured I'd find a few embarrassing videos, maybe some footage of my old apartment, the kind of thing you watch once and then delete out of secondhand embarrassment. But when I scrolled through the files, I realized something was off. The dates didn't make sense. The first video was labeled 2007_10_14, which was about right, but the next one jumped to 2011_03_02, and then there were a handful from 2015, a year I knew for a fact I hadn't touched the camera. I frowned, thinking maybe the date settings had glitched, or maybe I'd lent the camera to someone and forgotten about it. But the more I looked, the less sense it made. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, plugged the camera into the wall, and started watching. The first few videos were exactly what I expected. A blurry shot of my old dorm room, my roommate making faces at the camera, a shaky pan across a crowded party. I laughed at the clothes, the music, the way we all seemed so sure of ourselves. For a while, it was exactly the kind of nostalgia I'd been promised. But then I got to the footage from 2015. The first video started with a shot of a hallway. The camera was pointed at the floor, the image wobbling as if whoever was holding it was walking slowly, carefully. The carpet was a dull, industrial gray, the kind you find in office buildings or cheap hotels. There was no sound except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. I didn't recognize the place. I didn't recognize the voice either, when it spoke, a low, uncertain whisper, barely audible over the static. "Is this thing on?" the voice said. "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if anyone can." I paused the video, my heart thumping in my chest. I rewound it, played it again, trying to place the voice. It wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone I knew. The accent was wrong, the cadence off. It sounded tired, scared. I let the video play. The camera moved down the hallway, pausing at a door. The person behind the camera reached out, their hand pale and trembling, and pushed the door open. The room beyond was empty, lit by a single flickering bulb. There was a table in the center, a chair, and nothing else. The camera lingered on the table for a long moment, as if waiting for something to happen. Then the video cut out. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I didn't remember filming it. I didn't remember lending the camera to anyone in 2015. I checked the file info, but there was nothing unusual, just a timestamp, a file size, nothing to explain how it had gotten there. I scrolled to the next video. This one was shorter, maybe 30 seconds. The camera was pointed at a window, rain streaking down the glass. Outside, the world was dark, the only light coming from a distant street lamp. The same voice spoke again, softer this time. "I think it's getting closer," the voice said. I can hear it in the walls. A chill ran down my spine. I paused the video, looked around the garage as if expecting to see someone standing behind me. The air felt colder, heavier. I told myself it was just a prank, that someone had borrowed the camera and filmed these as a joke. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I kept watching. The next video was longer. The camera was moving again, this time through a stairwell. The steps were concrete, stained and cracked. The person behind the camera was breathing hard, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. Every so often, they would glance over their shoulder, the camera jerking as if they were afraid of being followed. At the bottom of the stairs, the camera paused. There was a door, heavy and metal, with a small window set into it. The person behind the camera pressed their face to the glass, and for a moment, I thought I saw something move on the other side, a shadow, quick and silent, gone before I could be sure it was ever there. The video ended with a sudden burst of static. I sat there, the camera heavy in my hands, my mind racing. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that these videos shouldn't exist. I hadn't filmed them. I hadn't been in those places. And yet, there they were, on my old camera, waiting for me to find them. I wanted to believe there was a rational explanation. Maybe I'd forgotten something, maybe I'd filmed these places in a haze of sleep deprivation, or maybe a friend had borrowed the camera and never told me. But the more I watched, the less sense it made. The voice was always the same, low, anxious, never quite loud enough to be clear. The hands that sometimes appeared in the frame were thin, almost bony, with a faded scar across the knuckles that I didn't recognize. I checked my own hands, just to be sure. No scar. No memory of ever having one. The next video was different. It started with the camera lying on its side, pointed at a ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead. The blades cast long, warped shadows across the ceiling, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, the camera was picked up, and the view shifted to a cluttered desk. Papers were scattered everywhere, handwritten notes, old receipts, a map with red lines drawn across it. The camera lingered on the map, zooming in on a spot circled in thick black ink. I squinted, trying to make out the street names, but the image was too grainy. The voice spoke again, closer this time, as if the person was leaning right into the microphone. If you find this, don't come looking. It's not safe. I thought I could get out, but I was wrong. It's still here. A shiver ran through me. I paused the video, rewound it, played it again. The words were clear, but the meaning was slippery, like trying to hold on to water. What wasn't safe? What was still here? I wanted to dismiss it as a prank, but the fear in the voice was real. It was the kind of fear you can't fake. I scrolled through the rest of the files, looking for something, anything, that would explain what I was seeing. Most of the videos were short, a minute or less. Some were just static, or shots of empty rooms, or the camera pointed at the floor while footsteps echoed in the background. But a few stood out. One video showed a bathroom mirror, fogged with steam. The camera was held low, as if the person didn't want to see their own reflection. The voice whispered, "It's in the glass. Don't look too long." The camera jerked away, and for a split second, I thought I saw a face in the mirror, pale, wide-eyed, mouth open in a silent scream. But when I paused and rewound, it was gone. Just a trick of the light, I told myself. Just my imagination. Another video was filmed outside, in the rain. The camera was pointed at a row of streetlights, their bulbs flickering in the downpour. The voice was barely audible over the sound of water hitting the pavement. "I can't go home. It knows where I live. If you're watching this, I'm sorry." I stopped the video, my hands shaking. I didn't know why I felt so unsettled. I'd watched horror movies, played scary games, read creepypastas online. But this was different. This felt personal, like the camera was speaking directly to me, warning me about something I couldn't see. I tried to remember where I'd bought the camera. Had it been new? Second-hand? I couldn't recall. I dug through my old emails, searching for a receipt, but found nothing. I called a few friends from college, asked if they remembered borrowing it, but none of them did. One friend laughed and said, "Dude, you always had that thing glued to your hand. If anyone else had used it, you'd have noticed." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe there was a simple answer. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't remember much about that year at all. 2015 was a blur, work, bills, a breakup I barely remembered. I'd moved apartments twice, lost touch with most of my friends. It was a year I'd tried to forget, and now it was coming back to haunt me in the form of videos I couldn't explain. I decided to copy the files to my laptop, hoping I could analyze them more closely. Maybe there was metadata, some clue hidden in the code. As the files transferred, I noticed something strange. The file sizes didn't match the lengths of the videos. Some were only a few seconds long, but took up hundreds of megabytes. Others were several minutes, but barely registered on the hard drive. I ran a virus scan, thinking maybe the files were corrupted, but nothing came up. I opened one of the larger files in a video editor, scrubbing through frame by frame. Most of it was just static, but every so often, a single frame would flash by, an image too quick to see at normal speed. I paused on one, my breath catching in my throat. It was a photo of me. Not a video, not a reflection, an actual photo, taken from behind, as I sat at my desk. The timestamp was from last week. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I hadn't used the camera in years. I hadn't even known where it was until today. How could it have taken a photo of me, in my own apartment, just days ago? I checked the other files, scrubbing through each one, looking for more hidden frames. I found dozens. Photos of me walking to work, sitting in my car, standing in my kitchen. Always from behind, always just out of focus. None of them were photos I'd ever taken. None of them should exist. I felt sick. I closed the laptop, unplugged the camera, and sat in the dark, listening to the sound of my own breathing. I wanted to throw the camera away, smash it, burn it, anything to get rid of it. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped by the knowledge that something had been watching me, recording me, for years without my knowledge. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those images, my own back, my own silhouette, always just out of reach, always watched from some impossible angle. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the camera had been hacked. Maybe someone had broken into my apartment, planted it, used it to mess with me. But the more I tried to convince myself, the less I believed it. The camera had been buried in a box in my parents' garage, under years of junk. No one could have gotten to it. No one even knew it existed. I woke up before dawn, the sky outside still dark, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the camera on my desk. It looked so ordinary, so harmless. Just a piece of outdated tech, a relic from a simpler time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, even now, even with the battery dead and the lens cap on. I decided I needed answers. I needed to know where those videos had come from, who had filmed them, how they'd ended up on my camera. I started by searching online, forums, tech support threads, anything about digital cameras and mysterious files. Most of what I found was useless. People complaining about corrupted SD cards, lost vacation photos, the usual. But then I stumbled across a thread on an old message board, buried deep in the archives. The thread was titled, "Strange Footage on Old Cameras, Anyone Else?" The first post was from 2012. The user described finding videos on a second-hand camcorder, videos they didn't remember filming, places they'd never been. The details were eerily similar to mine, the static, the strange voice, the sense of being watched. Other users chimed in, sharing their own stories. Some had found photos of themselves, just like I had. Others described hearing whispers in the audio, voices that seemed to know things they shouldn't. One post stood out. It was from a user named Lost Signal. They claimed to have traced the origin of the footage to a specific location, a storage facility on the edge of town, long abandoned, rumored to have once been a film processing lab. According to Lost Signal, anyone who brought their camera there would find new footage on it the next day. No one knew how it worked. Some said it was a hoax, others that it was a curse. But the stories were all the same, footage that shouldn't exist, images of things you'd never seen, never done. I copied the address into my phone, my hands shaking. It was only a few miles away. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just an urban legend, a story made up to scare people. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to see for myself. I packed the camera in my backpack, along with a flashlight, a spare battery, and a notebook. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't want to explain. I just got in my car and drove, the city still half asleep, the streets empty and silent. The storage facility was exactly as described, an ugly concrete block, surrounded by a chain-link fence, the sign out front faded and cracked. The gate was unlocked. I parked outside, heart pounding, and walked in, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air smelled of dust and old oil, the kind of scent that clings to forgotten places. Inside, the facility was a maze of corridors and storage units, most of them padlocked, a few standing open and empty. I wandered through the halls, shining my flashlight into the shadows, looking for anything that might explain what was happening. I found nothing, just old furniture, broken appliances, boxes of junk. But then, at the end of one corridor, I found a door. It was different from the others, heavier, painted a dull red, with a sign that read, Processing Lab, Authorized Personnel Only. The lock was broken. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dark, the only light coming from a row of dusty windows near the ceiling. Old film reels were stacked on metal shelves, their labels faded and unreadable. A workbench stood against one wall, covered in tools and scraps of film. In the center of the room was a table, and on the table was a camera, an old Super 8, its lens cracked, the body covered in dust. I set my own camera down beside it, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. I pulled out my notebook and started writing, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. But as I wrote, I heard something, a faint hum, like the sound of a projector running in another room. I followed the sound to a door at the back of the lab. It was ajar, swinging gently on its hinges. Beyond it was a small projection room, the walls lined with faded movie posters. A projector sat on a table, its reel spinning, casting flickering images onto a cracked white screen. I stepped closer, squinting at the footage. It was grainy, black and white, but I recognized the setting immediately. It was the same hallway from the videos on my camera, the same gray carpet, the same flickering lights. The figure in the footage was holding a camera, walking slowly, just like in my videos. But then the figure turned, and for the first time, I saw their face. It was me. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. I hadn't filmed this. I hadn't been here before today. But there I was, on the screen, walking down that endless hallway, looking over my shoulder, fear etched into every line of my face. The projector sputtered, the image flickering, and then the screen went dark. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to catch my breath. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what any of it meant. All I knew was that something was very, very wrong. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those images, my own back, my own silhouette, always just out of reach, always watched from some impossible angle. I kept telling myself there had to be a rational explanation. Maybe the camera had been hacked. Maybe someone had broken into my apartment, planted it, used it to mess with me. But the more I tried to convince myself, the less I believed it. The camera had been buried in a box in my parents' garage, under years of junk. No one could have gotten to it. No one even knew it existed. I woke up before dawn, the sky outside still dark, and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the camera on my desk. It looked so ordinary, so harmless. Just a piece of outdated tech, a relic from a simpler time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me, even now, even with the battery dead and the lens cap on. I decided I needed answers. I needed to know where those videos had come from, who had filmed them, how they'd ended up on my camera. I started by searching online, forums, tech support threads, anything about digital cameras and mysterious files. Most of what I found was useless. People complaining about corrupted SD cards, lost vacation photos, the usual. But then I stumbled across a thread on an old message board, buried deep in the archives. The thread was titled, "Strange Footage on Old Cameras, Anyone Else?" The first post was from 2012. The user described finding videos on a second-hand camcorder, videos they didn't remember filming, places they'd never been. The details were eerily similar to mine, the static, the strange voice, the sense of being watched. Other users chimed in, sharing their own stories. Some had found photos of themselves, just like I had. Others described hearing whispers in the audio, voices that seemed to know things they shouldn't. One post stood out. It was from a user named Lost Signal. They claimed to have traced the origin of the footage to a specific location, a storage facility on the edge of town, long abandoned, rumored to have once been a film processing lab. According to Lost Signal, anyone who brought their camera there would find new footage on it the next day. No one knew how it worked. Some said it was a hoax, others that it was a curse. But the stories were all the same, footage that shouldn't exist, images of things you'd never seen, never done. I copied the address into my phone, my hands shaking. It was only a few miles away. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it was just an urban legend, a story made up to scare people. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to see for myself. I packed the camera in my backpack, along with a flashlight, a spare battery, and a notebook. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't want to explain. I just got in my car and drove, the city still half asleep, the streets empty and silent. The storage facility was exactly as described, an ugly concrete block, surrounded by a chain-link fence, the sign out front faded and cracked. The gate was unlocked. I parked outside, heart pounding, and walked in, the gravel crunching under my boots. The air smelled of dust and old oil, the kind of scent that clings to forgotten places. Inside, the facility was a maze of corridors and storage units, most of them padlocked, a few standing open and empty. I wandered through the halls, shining my flashlight into the shadows, looking for anything that might explain what was happening. I found nothing, just old furniture, broken appliances, boxes of junk. But then, at the end of one corridor, I found a door. It was different from the others, heavier, painted a dull red, with a sign that read, "Processing Lab, Authorized Personnel Only." The lock was broken. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. I left the projection room in a daze, the echo of my own face on that flickering screen burned into my mind. The air in the lab felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were closing in. I tried to steady my breathing, telling myself it was just a trick of the light, a coincidence, a nightmare I hadn't woken from. But the more I tried to rationalize, the more the fear crept in, cold and insistent. I picked up my camera from the table, half expecting it to feel different, heavier, charged with some new energy. But it was just a camera, plastic, metal, a scratched lens. I turned it over in my hands, searching for anything out of place. There was nothing. No hidden compartments, no strange markings. Just the same old device I'd carried through college, through years of my life I could barely remember. I thought about leaving. I thought about running out of the building, getting in my car, and never looking back. But something kept me there, a need to understand, to find the missing piece that would make all of this make sense. I went back to the workbench, searching through the piles of film, the scattered tools. Most of it was junk, but then I found a small, battered notebook wedged between two reels. The cover was stained, the pages yellowed with age. I flipped through it, scanning the cramped handwriting. Most of it was technical notes, exposure times, chemical formulas, lists of names and dates. But near the back, the tone changed. The writing grew frantic, the lines slanting across the page. "They're not just recordings," one entry read. "They're windows. Every time you watch, you open the door a little wider. Every time you remember, it remembers you." Another entry, "I see myself in places I've never been. I hear my own voice saying things I've never said. The footage changes when I'm not looking. It's learning." I closed the notebook, my hands trembling. I wanted to throw it away, to destroy it, but I couldn't. I needed answers, and this was the only clue I had. I decided to try something. I set up my camera on the workbench, pointed it at the projection screen, and hit record. I wanted to see what would happen, if anything would change. I let it run for a few minutes, then stopped the recording and played it back. At first, it was exactly what I expected, a shaky shot of the empty screen, the dust motes swirling in the beam of light. But then, as I watched, the image began to shift. The screen flickered, and suddenly I was looking at a different room, a room I recognized as my childhood bedroom, the wallpaper faded, the bed neatly made. The camera panned slowly, as if searching for something. Then it stopped, focused on the closet door. The door creaked open, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing inside, tall, thin, its face hidden in shadow. The camera zoomed in, the image growing grainy, distorted. The figure stepped forward, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was wearing my clothes, moving with my gestures, but its face was wrong, blurred, shifting, as if it couldn't decide what it wanted to be. I stopped the playback, my heart racing. I looked around the lab, half expecting to see the figure standing behind me. But I was alone. The only sound was the hum of the projector, the distant drip of water somewhere in the building. I knew I couldn't stay. Whatever was happening here, it was getting stronger. The footage was changing, adapting, reaching into places it shouldn't be able to go. I packed up my camera, the notebook, and hurried out of the lab, locking the door behind me. Outside, the sky was gray, the sun hidden behind thick clouds. I got in my car and drove home, my mind spinning with questions. Was I losing my mind? Was this some elaborate prank, a glitch in the camera, a trick of memory? Or was it something else, something older, deeper, that had been waiting for someone to find it? When I got home, I locked the doors, closed the blinds, and sat at my desk with the camera and the notebook. I wanted to forget, to pretend none of it had happened, but I couldn't. The images were burned into my mind, the hallway, the mirror, the figure in the closet. I opened the notebook again, searching for anything I'd missed. Near the very end, there was a final entry, written in shaky, desperate handwriting. If you're reading this, it's already too late. The footage is a seed. Once you've seen it, it grows. It will follow you, change you, until you're part of it. Don't watch. Don't remember. Forget. I closed the notebook, my hands shaking. I looked at the camera, its lens dark and unblinking. I thought about destroying it, but something stopped me. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something else, something planted by the footage itself. That night, I dreamed of the hallway. I was walking, camera in hand, the lights flickering overhead. I could hear footsteps behind me, growing closer with every step. I turned, but there was nothing there, just the endless corridor, stretching on and on. When I woke, the camera was on my bedside table, even though I was sure I'd left it on my desk. I stared at the camera, my mind racing to fill in the blanks. Had I gotten up in the night and moved it without remembering? Was I sleepwalking, or was this just another trick, another way for the fear to worm its way deeper? I reached out, hesitated, then picked it up. It felt cold, heavier than before, as if it had absorbed something from the night. I set it back on my desk, determined not to let paranoia get the better of me. I tried to go about my day as usual, coffee, emails, the endless scroll of work tasks, but I couldn't focus. Every time I glanced at the camera, I felt its presence, like a weight in the room. I kept thinking about the notebook, about the words scrawled in desperation. Once you've seen it, it grows. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to do what I should have done from the start. I called a professional. Not the police, I knew how that would sound. Instead, I reached out to a friend from college, someone who'd gone into digital forensics. I told her I'd found some strange files on an old camera, that I was worried it might be infected with malware or something worse. I left out the details about the footage, the notebook, the figure in the closet. I just wanted her to look at the files, to tell me there was a logical explanation. She agreed to help. I drove across town, the camera and SD card sealed in a plastic bag. Her office was cluttered with monitors, hard drives, and the faint smell of solder. She greeted me with a hug, then got to work, plugging the card into her computer and running a series of scans. At first, everything seemed normal. The files were standard video formats, nothing unusual in the metadata. But then she frowned, leaning closer to the screen. "That's odd," she said. "Some of these files have timestamps that don't make sense. Look, this one says it was created in 2031. That's not possible." She clicked through the files, her brow furrowing deeper. "And these, they're huge, but there's barely any video data. It's like they're filled with static, or something else." She opened one of the larger files in a hex editor, scrolling through lines of code. "There's something embedded here. Not video, not audio. It looks like text. Or maybe an image, but it's encrypted. I've never seen anything like it." I watched as she tried to extract the data, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The screen filled with gibberish, symbols, numbers, fragments of words. But then, for a split second, an image flashed on the monitor. It was my face. Not a photo, not a frame from a video, just my face, staring back at me, eyes wide and unblinking. The image was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by more static. My friend looked at me, her expression uneasy. "Are you sure you didn't film these? This is weird, even for corrupted files." I shook my head, trying to keep my voice steady. "I swear, I didn't. I don't know how any of this got on there." She hesitated, then unplugged the SD card, handing it back to me. "I'd get rid of it, if I were you. Whatever this is, it's not normal. And I don't think it's just a glitch." I thanked her, trying to hide my fear. I left her office, the camera and card burning a hole in my bag. I wanted to throw them away, to leave them in a dumpster and never look back. But something stopped me. The same curiosity, the same compulsion that had driven me to the storage facility, to the projection room, to the notebook. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it scared me. That night, I set up the camera on my desk, pointed it at the wall, and hit record. I let it run for hours, the red light blinking in the darkness. I sat in bed, watching the shadows crawl across the ceiling, listening for any sound that didn't belong. When I finally checked the footage, my heart sank. The video started normally, just the blank wall, the hum of my computer. But then, around the 2-hour mark, the image began to distort. The wall seemed to ripple, the shadows twisting into shapes I couldn't quite make out. And then, for a brief moment, the camera turned, by itself, impossibly, panning across the room until it was pointed directly at me, lying in bed. I watched, frozen, as my own sleeping form filled the frame. The camera zoomed in, the image growing grainy, the colors bleeding together. My face was peaceful, eyes closed, but as the camera drew closer, my expression changed. My eyes snapped open, staring directly into the lens, wide and empty. The video ended with a burst of static. I sat there, shaking, the camera still on my desk, its lens pointed at me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was losing my mind, or if something had truly followed me home. All I knew was that the footage was changing, growing, just like the notebook had warned. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that image, my own face, eyes wide and empty, staring into the camera as if I'd been waiting for it. I kept replaying the footage in my mind, trying to convince myself it was a trick, a glitch, some kind of sleepwalking episode caught on tape. But deep down, I knew better. The camera had moved on its own. The footage had changed on its own. And now, it was watching me. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I needed someone else to see what I was seeing, to tell me I wasn't crazy. I called my sister, told her I needed to talk, that it was important. She sounded worried, but agreed to come over that afternoon. When she arrived, I tried to explain everything, the old camera, the strange footage, the images of myself that I'd never recorded. She listened patiently, her brow furrowed, but I could tell she was skeptical. I didn't blame her. If our roles were reversed, I wouldn't have believed it either. I set up my laptop, plugged in the camera, and played the videos for her. At first, she just watched in silence, her expression unreadable. But as the footage grew stranger, the hallway, the mirror, the figure in the closet, her face paled. When the video showed my own sleeping form, eyes snapping open, she recoiled, covering her mouth with her hand. "Did you fake this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I shook my head. "I wish I had." She stared at the screen, then at me. "You need to get rid of it. Smash it, burn it, whatever. Just get it out of here." I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But something held me back. The same compulsion, the same curiosity. I needed to know what would happen next. I needed to see it through, even if it destroyed me. My sister left soon after, refusing to take the camera with her. She told me to call her if anything else happened, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't want to be involved. She didn't want to know. That night, I tried to stay awake, but exhaustion finally caught up with me. I drifted off in my chair, the camera still on my desk, its lens pointed at the wall. I dreamed of corridors, endless, twisting, lined with doors that led nowhere. I heard footsteps behind me, always just out of sight, always getting closer. When I woke, the camera was gone. Panic surged through me. I tore apart my apartment, searching every room, every closet, every drawer. Nothing. It was as if the camera had vanished into thin air. I tried to tell myself I'd moved it in my sleep, that I'd hidden it somewhere and forgotten. But I knew that wasn't true. The camera was gone, and I had no idea where it had gone or how. I tried to go about my day, but I couldn't focus. Every shadow seemed to move, every reflection seemed to watch me. I kept expecting to see the camera in the corner of my eye, waiting for me to notice it. But it never appeared. That evening, as the sun set and the apartment filled with shadows, I heard a sound, a faint, mechanical whirring, coming from the hallway outside my door. I froze, heart pounding, listening. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was right outside. I crept to the door, pressed my ear against it. The whirring stopped. Silence. I opened the door a crack, peering into the dimly lit hallway. At first, I saw nothing. But then, at the far end, I saw it, the camera, sitting upright in the middle of the floor, its lens pointed directly at me. I stared at it, unable to move. How had it gotten there? Who had put it there? I stepped into the hallway, my footsteps echoing on the linoleum. The camera didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just watched. I picked it up, half expecting it to be hot to the touch, but it was cold, almost icy. I brought it back inside, set it on the table, and sat across from it, staring into the lens. I turned it on. The screen flickered to life, blue and grainy. There was a new video file, timestamp just minutes ago. I pressed play. The footage showed my apartment, filmed from the hallway. The camera moved slowly, panning across the door, the walls, the pictures on the shelves. Then it turned, focusing on me, standing in the doorway, staring back at the camera, my face pale and drawn. But I hadn't been holding the camera. I hadn't filmed that footage. I'd been inside, behind the door, until I heard the whirring. I stopped the video, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I was losing my mind, or if something else was using the camera, filming me, watching me, learning from me. I sat there for hours, staring at the camera, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. The apartment was silent, the only sound my own breathing. I barely moved for the rest of the night. Every time I thought about turning the camera off, or smashing it, or even just putting it away, a wave of dread washed over me, like I'd be breaking some unspoken rule, like I'd be inviting something worse. I tried to distract myself, scrolling through my phone, reading the same news headlines over and over, but my eyes kept drifting back to the camera. It sat there, silent and still, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for me to do something. Eventually, exhaustion won out. I left the camera on the table, crawled into bed, and pulled the covers over my head like I was a kid again. I told myself I'd deal with it in the morning, that I'd take it somewhere far away and leave it, or maybe finally destroy it. But sleep didn't bring relief. My dreams were filled with static, with flickering images of myself walking down endless corridors, always being watched, always being followed. When I woke, the apartment was filled with a strange, metallic smell, like old batteries or burnt wires. I stumbled into the living room, heart pounding, and found the camera exactly where I'd left it. But the screen was on, glowing faintly in the early morning light. There was another new video file, timestamp just before dawn. I hesitated, then pressed play. The footage was different this time. It started with a shot of my bedroom door, closed tight. The camera moved closer, the image shaking as if whoever, or whatever, was holding it was nervous. The door creaked open, and the camera slipped inside. I saw myself, asleep in bed, covers pulled up to my chin. The camera hovered at the foot of the bed, watching me breathe, watching me dream. Then, slowly, it moved closer. The image grew grainy, the colors bleeding together. My sleeping face filled the frame, peaceful at first, then twitching, frowning, as if I could sense the camera's presence even in my sleep. My eyes fluttered open, staring directly into the lens, wide and empty. The video ended with a burst of static. I dropped the camera, stumbling back from the table. My skin crawled with the memory of those empty eyes, the way I'd stared into the lens as if I'd been waiting for it. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but stay in that apartment another second. But I couldn't move. I was frozen, trapped by the knowledge that the camera was watching me, even when I slept. I called my sister again, my voice shaking. I told her what had happened, begged her to come over. She hesitated, but finally agreed. When she arrived, she took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I showed her the new footage, watched her face go pale as she realized what she was seeing. "We have to get rid of it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Right now." We wrapped the camera in a towel, stuffed it in a box, and drove to the edge of town. There was a landfill there, a sprawling wasteland of broken appliances and rotting garbage. We found a spot as far from the entrance as we could, dug a shallow hole, and buried the camera. I felt a strange sense of relief as the dirt covered it, as if I was finally free. But the relief didn't last. That night, I dreamed of the landfill. I saw the camera, buried in the dirt, its lens still glowing faintly. I saw myself, standing over the grave, watching as something crawled out of the shadows and picked up the camera, cradling it in long, thin fingers. The figure turned, and I saw its face, my face, but wrong, stretched and twisted, eyes wide and empty. I woke in a cold sweat, heart racing. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, just my mind playing tricks on me. But when I got up and looked out the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, on the sidewalk across the street, was the camera. It sat upright, its lens pointed directly at my apartment. I stared at it, unable to move. I wanted to believe it was a coincidence, that someone had found it and brought it back, but I knew better. The camera had come back. It had found me. I called my sister, told her what had happened. She didn't answer. I left message after message, my voice growing more frantic with each call. But she never called back. I sat by the window, watching the camera, waiting for it to move. But it didn't. It just sat there, silent and still, watching me. As the sun set, the streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the pavement. The camera's lens caught the light, glinting like an eye. I felt a chill run through me, a sense of dread deeper than anything I'd ever known. I knew then that I couldn't escape. The camera would always find me. It would always watch me. And no matter what I did, no matter how far I ran, it would never let me go. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the camera's lens, unblinking, fixed on my window. I kept the lights on, pacing from room to room, checking the locks, peering through the blinds. The street outside was empty except for that one impossible object, sitting in the exact center of the sidewalk, as if it had been placed there with purpose. I tried to convince myself that someone was playing a trick on me, that it was all some elaborate prank, but the fear in my chest was too real, too heavy. At some point, I must have dozed off, because I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the table. It was a text from my sister, "I'm okay. Don't call. Don't come over." That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just those words. I tried calling her anyway, but it went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice trembling, begging her to call me back, to let me know she was safe. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I looked out the window again. The camera was gone. For a moment, I felt a surge of relief, but it was quickly replaced by dread. If the camera wasn't outside, where was it? I checked the hallway, the stairwell, the lobby. Nothing. I even went outside, walking up and down the block, searching every shadow, every doorway. The camera had vanished, leaving no trace behind. I went back inside, locked the door, and sat on the floor, my back against the wall. I tried to think, to make sense of everything that had happened. The footage, the dreams, the way the camera kept coming back no matter what I did. I remembered the notebook from the lab, the frantic warning scrawled in the margins: once you've seen it, it grows. It will follow you, change you, until you're part of it. I realized then that it wasn't just about the camera. It was about the footage, the act of watching, of remembering. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of my life I'd spent looking back, replaying old memories, watching old videos, trying to hold on to moments that were already gone. Maybe that was what the camera wanted. Maybe that was how it grew. I decided to try something different. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and started recording. I spoke directly to the lens, my voice shaking but determined. If you're watching this, if you find this footage, don't look for the camera. Don't try to understand. Just forget. Move on. Don't let it in. I uploaded the video to the cloud, then deleted it from my phone. I went through my apartment, gathering every old photo, every piece of technology that could record or replay an image. I smashed them, one by one, until there was nothing left but shards and dust. I threw the pieces in the trash, took the bag outside, and left it on the curb. When I came back inside, the apartment felt different, emptier, quieter. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. I sat on the floor, closed my eyes, and tried to clear my mind. I focused on the present, the feel of the carpet under my hands, the sound of my own breathing, the warmth of the sun on my face. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. Every shadow seemed to move, every reflection seemed to flicker with hidden images. I tried to ignore it, to focus on anything else, but the sense of being watched only grew stronger. That night, I dreamed of the camera again. But this time, I wasn't the one being filmed. I was the one holding the camera, walking through endless corridors, searching for something I couldn't name. Every door I opened led to another hallway, another empty room, another reflection of myself staring back at me. The camera grew heavier with every step, its lens growing larger, wider, until it filled my entire field of vision. I woke with a start, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. The apartment was silent, the only sound the distant hum of traffic outside. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw something move behind me, a flicker of motion, a shadow in the corner of my eye. But when I turned, there was nothing there. I went back to the living room, sat on the couch, and tried to calm myself. I told myself it was over, that the camera was gone, that I was free. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that something had followed me out of those videos, out of those dreams. I checked my phone, hoping for a message from my sister, but there was nothing. I scrolled through my contacts, my photos, my messages, looking for any sign that things were back to normal. But every time I looked at my own face, on my ID, in an old selfie, in a group photo, I felt a jolt of fear, as if I was looking at a stranger. I realized then that the camera hadn't just been watching me. It had been changing me, bit by bit, every time I looked into a lens, every time I remembered. And now, even without the camera, I couldn't escape its gaze. I tried to live normally after that, or at least to pretend. I went to work, answered emails, made small talk with coworkers who seemed to sense something was off but didn't ask. I avoided mirrors, cameras, anything that could reflect or record. I kept my phone's camera covered with tape, turned off every screen in my apartment when I wasn't using it. But the feeling of being watched never left. It was like a pressure at the back of my skull, a constant awareness that something was just out of sight, waiting for me to slip. Days blurred together. I stopped sleeping well, waking up every hour with the sense that someone had just left the room. Sometimes I'd find things moved, my keys on the wrong table, a chair pulled out from the kitchen, the bathroom door left ajar. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that I was making mistakes and forgetting, but I knew better. The camera was gone, but its presence lingered, woven into the fabric of my life. One evening, as I was making dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. No words, just a video file. My hands shook as I stared at the notification, dread pooling in my stomach. I knew I shouldn't open it. I knew, deep down, what it would be. But I couldn't help myself. I tapped the screen. The video was short, maybe 10 seconds. It showed my apartment, filmed from the outside, the camera slowly panning up to my window. The lights were on. I could see myself inside, moving from room to room, oblivious to the watcher below. The video ended with a close-up of my window, the lens focusing on my silhouette as I passed by. I dropped the phone, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I wanted to run, to leave the apartment and never come back, but I knew it wouldn't matter. The camera would find me, no matter where I went. It always had. I called my sister again, desperate for a voice, for any sign that I wasn't alone. This time, she answered. Her voice was flat, distant, as if she was speaking from the bottom of a well. Don't watch the videos, she said. Don't answer the door. Don't look in the mirrors. I tried to ask her where she was, what had happened, but the line went dead. I stared at the phone, willing it to ring again, but it stayed silent. That night, I barricaded the door, pushed furniture against it, turned off every light. I sat in the dark, listening to the sounds of the building, the creak of pipes, the hum of the fridge, the distant footsteps of neighbors. Every sound made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to move. At some point, I must have fallen asleep, because I woke to the sound of knocking. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. I held my breath, heart pounding, waiting for it to stop. But it didn't. The knocking continued, steady and patient, as if whoever was outside knew I was listening. I crept to the door, peered through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No one there. But the knocking continued, louder now, echoing through the apartment. I backed away, clutching my phone, ready to call for help. But then I saw it, a shadow moving across the wall, long and thin, stretching toward me. I turned, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room, the silent screens, the darkness pressing in from all sides. I ran to the window, thinking I could escape, but when I looked outside, I saw myself standing on the sidewalk, camera in hand, staring up at my own window. My face was blank, eyes wide and empty, just like in the videos. I stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table, landing hard on the floor. The knocking stopped. Silence filled the apartment, heavy and absolute. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, too afraid to move. I realized then that it was over. The camera didn't need to be in my apartment, or on my desk, or even in my hands. It was inside me now, a part of me, watching and recording every moment, every thought, every fear. I thought about the notebook, about the warnings scrawled in the margins. Don't watch. Don't remember. Forget. But it was too late for that. I had watched. I had remembered. And now, I would never forget. The next morning, I packed a bag and left the apartment. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just walked, one foot in front of the other, through empty streets and silent neighborhoods, trying to outrun the feeling of being watched. But no matter how far I went, the sense of the camera's gaze never left me. Sometimes, when I pass a window or a mirror, I catch a glimpse of myself, just for a second, just out of the corner of my eye. And every time, I wonder if it's really me, or just another recording, another piece of footage waiting to be found. I wandered for days, maybe weeks. Time lost its shape, stretching and folding in on itself. I stayed in cheap motels, slept on park benches, kept moving so the city never quite recognized me. I left my phone behind, paid in cash, avoided cameras and crowds. But the feeling never faded. It was as if the world itself had become a lens, every surface reflecting me back at myself, every shadow holding the possibility of being watched. Sometimes, I'd see flashes of movement in the corner of my eye, a figure ducking behind a tree, a silhouette in a window, a reflection that lingered a moment too long. I tried not to look, tried not to acknowledge it, but the harder I tried, the more insistent it became. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind, if the camera had infected me with something that couldn't be seen or measured. But then I'd remember the footage, the impossible images, the way my own face had stared back at me from places I'd never been. One night, I found myself in a small town on the edge of nowhere. The streets were empty, the shops closed, the only light coming from a flickering street lamp outside a boarded-up diner. I sat on a bench, watching the moths circle the bulb, and tried to remember who I'd been before all this started. I thought about my sister, about the last time I'd heard her voice, flat and distant, warning me not to look, not to remember. I wondered if she was still out there, running from her own reflection, or if she'd finally given in and let the camera claim her. I pulled the notebook from my bag, the one I'd taken from the lab. The pages were worn, the ink smudged, but the words were still there, desperate and insistent. I read them over and over, searching for some clue, some way to break the cycle. But the warnings were always the same: don't watch. Don't remember. Forget. But forgetting was impossible. The more I tried, the more the memories pressed in, images of myself walking down endless corridors, staring into mirrors that never quite reflected what they should, hearing my own voice whispering secrets I'd never spoken. I realized then that the camera hadn't just recorded me. It had rewritten me, turned my life into a loop of footage that played over and over, always changing, always watching. I thought about destroying the notebook, burning it, tearing out the pages and scattering them to the wind. But I knew it wouldn't matter. The story was already inside me, etched into my bones, playing behind my eyes every time I blinked. As dawn crept over the horizon, I made a decision. I would go back to where it started. Not my apartment, not the landfill, but the storage facility, the old processing lab where I'd first seen my own face flickering on that cracked screen. Maybe there was something I'd missed, some way to end this, or at least to understand it. The town was only a few hours from the city. I hitched a ride with a trucker, kept my head down, tried not to think about the way his eyes lingered on me in the rearview mirror. When we reached the outskirts, I thanked him and walked the rest of the way, the city rising around me like a memory I couldn't shake. The storage facility was just as I remembered, gray concrete, chain-link fence, the sign out front faded and cracked. The gate was still unlocked. I slipped inside, heart pounding, and made my way to the back, to the red door marked, Processing Lab. The lock was broken, the door hanging open, as if it had been waiting for me. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of old film. The projector was still there, the reels stacked on the shelves, the workbench covered in scraps of tape and faded photographs. I set the notebook on the table, ran my fingers over the battered cover, and tried to steady my breathing. I turned on the projector, half expecting it not to work, but the bulb flickered to life, casting a pale circle of light on the wall. I loaded a reel at random, let it spin, watched as the images danced across the cracked paint. At first, it was just static, then flashes of places I recognized, my apartment, my childhood bedroom, the hallway from the videos. And always, somewhere in the frame, a figure watching, camera in hand, face blurred and shifting. I stepped closer, squinting at the screen, trying to make out the details. The figure turned, and for a moment, I saw my own face, eyes wide and empty, staring back at me. I reached out, touched the wall, and felt a jolt of cold run through my body. The images changed. Now I was walking through the storage facility, camera in hand, retracing my own steps. The footage looped, repeating the same moments over and over, each time a little different, a little more distorted. I realized then that I was watching myself watch myself, trapped in an endless cycle of observation and memory. I turned off the projector, the silence pressing in around me. I sat on the floor, the notebook in my lap, and tried to remember who I was before all this began. But the memories were slippery, shifting, replaced by images from the footage, by the feeling of being watched. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe days. The world outside faded, replaced by the hum of the projector, the flicker of images on the wall. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps in the hallway, voices whispering just out of reach. Sometimes I thought I saw my sister's face in the shadows, her eyes wide and empty, watching me. Eventually, I realized there was no escape. The camera wasn't just an object, or a curse, or a piece of haunted technology. It was a way of seeing, a way of remembering, a way of being trapped in your own story forever. And once you'd seen it, once you'd let it in, there was no way out. If you find this notebook, if you find the footage, if you see your own face staring back at you from a place you've never been, don't watch. Don't remember. Forget. Because once you let it in, it never lets you go.